If you're marketing for Christmas and you want to use some of those nostalgic Christmas characters, how do you know which ones you're legally allowed to use and which ones you were not? Let's talk to your favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that's dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Tony, as we're doing our holiday marketing, a lot of entrepreneurs want to use holiday characters. So how do we know if we're allowed to use Christmas-related characters in our marketing or whether they're ones we need to stay away from?
So I think this is where it just requires a great deal of due diligence and research to verify exactly the copyright interests associated with a lot of the notable holiday characters we've come to know and love. So obviously the automatic ones you think of are Santa, his reindeer, and that's including Rudolph, Frosty the Snowman, the Snow Miser, a bunch of other different characters that are part of the Christmas lore and the holiday lore, generally speaking. But this is where you have to be a little bit wise, because at the end of the day, there may be a character named Buddy the Elf, and that doesn't mean that you have full carte blanche access to use that character in some type of marketing. Or even someone like Frosty the Snowman, which was created through the Burl Ives cartoons from like the 1960s, the stop motion. That is something that is still governed under copyright. Mm-hmm. So when you're using any holiday characters, you would want to verify the copyright ownership, or at least the copyright status of that specific character. So characters that are governed under the Copyright Act of 1909 are most likely going to expire if they were created anytime before 1928. So we're talking like definitely characters like Santa and the basic reindeer, like, Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vincent, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen. Wow, I remember. So let's exclude Rudolph, though, because Rudolph was a later creation. But the main reindeer and Santa, those are part of the Christmas genre for decades. Clearly, that's something that would be in the public domain. Mm-hmm. However, with even acts or even copyrighted works that are still governed under the Copyright Act of 1909 that are from 1928 or older, that maybe were created by some type of corporate entity, those may still be governed under copyright law. Surely any works that were created under the Copyright Act in 1976, those are definitely still governed under copyright law. And the term for copyright for those assets is, for individual copyrights, the life of the author plus 70 years. For corporate entities, it's 95 years from date of publication. So definitely it's going to take likely 100 years before you're likely going to see a lot of those corporate copyright assets enter the public domain. So bottom line is steer clear of the copyrighted talent, checking when the copyright creation of that specific character took place. If it's something that is quite old, and I'm talking like, Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol old, like that's the kind of thing where it's likely okay to use in some type of holiday marketing. And of course, it just goes without saying, if you have any doubt whatsoever about the copyright status of any holiday characters, please go to your attorney if you have one. If you don't have one, go find one. Put that on your Santa's wish list for him to bring you, because honestly, that's going to be the foolproof way to make sure and ensure that you've got all your ducks in a row when it comes to holiday marketing this season.
And I think it's wise to point out that just because we think certain characters are very, very old, it is important to verify them. While we were doing our research for this episode, we discovered some of what we would consider those classic old characters were actually from songs that are not that old and still under protection. So making sure that you go through and you double check before you use things is incredibly important. I think it's also wise to point out that just because some characters like Santa Claus are available for us to use doesn't mean that every iteration of them is available for us to use. So if you happen to like a particular Santa from a movie or a TV show, that does not mean you can use that version.
So actually, to that point, a great example of that is the Coca-Cola Santa, which was created as marketing specific to the sale of Coca-Cola. And Coke has been milking Santa during every holiday season. It's really best to avoid that specific iteration of Santa because that's under the copyright of the Coca-Cola company. Now, they're able to create a Santa character because the general character of Santa is in the public domain. This is like no different than if you had, let's say, a cartoon version of, the reindeer. You can't copy that rendition of it if you're going to use used it for marketing, either authentically make your own or maybe even find clip art, if you will, or some other type of royalty-free imagery out there that evokes the image of what you're trying to portray with reindeer. So that's absolutely right. That's something that is really, really important to stress. And I think that kind of taking it outside the holiday lens for a moment, this is actually why Disney has been able to do all the movies that they have on a lot of like the Grimm brothers tales. So like, for example, Cinderella, their iteration of Cinderella is under copyright. The story version of it is under copyright. Even the theatrical performance that's available in some musical form, that's under copyright. But if you wanted to create a Cinderella character, the Cinderella character could be your vision, but you just have to make sure that it's not replicating, let's say, the Disney version of Cinderella. If you do that, then you're good to go.
And so if you have further questions on this, we would love to get them answered for you. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes to keep us legally protected in the entrepreneurial space. So anything on the legal side of how you are functioning within your business, we would love to cover for you, especially when it pertains to entertainment and IP law, because that's what Tony specializes in. And if you want to learn more from Tony, you can hang out on his social medias. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at The IP Professor. And you can check out my entertainment law podcast called End Scene, with new episodes dropping every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your marketing questions down below. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes to help us navigate the legal side of entrepreneurship. We will see you in the upcoming episodes as we continue to help you make this your most profitable year ever.